Hi, this is Bronwyn Keith-Hynes, and you're listening to Bluegrass Jam Along, the podcast for anyone and everyone who plays bluegrass.
So my guest this week on the podcast is Bronwyn Keith-Hynes, who you might know from Mile 12, you might know from her solo record Fiddler's Pastime, you might know from Molly Tuttle's new band. She's been Winfield Fiddle Champion, IBMA Momentum Instrumentalist of the Year, and is the current IBMA Fiddle Player of the Year as well. Bronwyn, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Bronwyn is a Welsh name, is that right?
Yeah, it is. It is. I don't have any Welsh family. I think my family just liked the name.
Yeah. So I read your sort of first generation Irish American father and then a Southern American mother. So there's a good mix for a fiddler.
Yeah, for sure.
And so you began playing pretty young by the sound of it.
Yeah, I started when I was 3 and just kind of fell into fiddling. I guess I saw some girls playing on the street when I was that little, and asked my parents for violin lessons, and just kind of been doing it as long as I can remember. But yeah, my family would take trips to Ireland a lot when I was a kid to visit relatives, and I got to hear a lot of the traditional music over there, and that's kind of the first sort of fiddling I got into when I was a kid. So I did that for a long time before I discovered bluegrass.
Was there a particular sort of moment you remember for discovering bluegrass, or was it just something that was around more when you were older?
Yeah, I think the first moment I really remember hearing it was at some fiddle camps that I went to when I was maybe 15 or so, and some of the kids that I was friends with had kind of discovered it a little bit ahead of me and were starting to play it a little bit, and I just remember hearing kind of the bluesy sound of it and just being totally into that sound, and just, what is that? That's so different from the Celtic fiddling that I started out with. So,
and I guess sort of opens up a whole new world of improvisation for one, because the Celtic tradition is pretty similar to the old time tradition in the States, where people just tend to play the melody, and there's ornamentation and lots of stylistic stuff going on, but there's a lot less improvisation than you find in bluegrass. So that must have been an eye-opener.
Yeah, totally. And just like kind of really exciting. You're a teenager and you're trying to express yourself and feeling misunderstood, and improvisation, bluesy improvisation feels like a great outlet.
Yeah, totally. And so what I'd like really excited to talk about is your album Fiddler's Pastime, which has been on repeat play in this house for quite a while now, and is an absolute favourite. But it's a really interesting mix. Traditionally somebody brings out their own record and you get an instrumentalist doing an instrumental record, or you get a singer doing a record full of songs, or you might get a mix of the two. And this feels, I don't know if it's like unusual, but it sort of shows all facets of fiddle playing, from you taking the lead to you sort of taking a supporting role in the background. And it's fascinating to hear that, because it's not necessarily a record you would put on and go, this is absolutely a fiddle record. It's just a music record full of great stuff that features fiddle throughout, but it's not sort of fiddle in your face throughout, is it?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I guess I wanted to make a record where I did everything I like to do on the fiddle. Yeah, which includes, playing fiddle tunes and playing song tunes I've written, and also backing up singers. And I mean, I think there's definitely some fiddle records that were an inspiration for that sort of thing. Aubrey Haney has put out, I guess, his first record, Doing My Time, was, I think, kind of a big influence. And that had a couple guest singers on there where he's just backing them up. And some of Michael Cleveland's records, have some guest singers. So I guess I was trying to go for a record kind of in that vein.
Yeah. And it's great because there's so much variety on there, not just in terms of sort of the material. The songs are different, the tunes are different, but in terms of the textures as well. There's full band stuff, there's, duets, there's a trio, there's, it's got a bit of everything, and it's great. It's just a really nice mix to listen to. And I'm sort of curious how that disparate mix of stuff sort of started to form as an album, because I remember sort of reading somewhere there was a particular tune that was the first one that sort of kicked the album off, really. You sort of had one tune, and that was the seed of everything. And I wondered how it all sort of came together around that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, the first tune I wrote for the album was that tune called Open Water, and it's like this fast G minor tune. It's kind of trying to write a tune in the style of like Ronnie McCoury. He's got all those great kind of modal, really fast, bluegrassy sounding tunes with maybe more than 2 parts. This one has like 3 and a bit parts. And, so it's definitely kind of trying to go for that. I remember I was, like hanging out at IBMA. It would be like IBMA 2019, I guess. And, I had some free time, and I think I'd already kind of started thinking that I might want to do an album, but, I just didn't really know where to start. And I was just trying to noodle around and write some tunes, maybe write something I would like enough to think about recording it. And yeah, I was sitting in a stairwell, and I wrote the A part of that tune there.
And that features Sierra Hull, that particular tune on the album.
I wanted mandolin and fiddle unison on that one.
Yeah. And at that point, did you sort of have an album in mind, or was it a case of, I've got a tune, I'll just sort of collect some more and see how it goes? Or did you have an idea for a project at that stage?
I think pretty soon after that, I had an idea for a project. I was really nervous to make something, it was my first record I'd ever made on my own. And, that's, I don't know, maybe for some people it's easy, but for me, it was really, really hard to gather the confidence to be like, I'm ready to do this. And like the world needs this, it's like, it's hard to feel that way, I think, for me. I remember I talked to Wes Corbett, who produced the album. He's a great banjo player. He's played with a number of bands over the years, but most recently plays with the Sam Bush Band. And he's been a friend for a long time. We were roommates a little bit. He let me live at his house when I first moved to Nashville, which was very nice, and has just been a really kind of supportive presence in my life, and kind of nurturing and just really, really cool musical figure. So I kind of felt like if anyone would help give me confidence and support me through that process, it would be him. So I remember sitting down with him and being like, well, I want to make an album and I have 1 tune. And he's like, cool, let's go write some more. And, we just kind of talked about what I wanted out of the album, that I wanted it to be a mixture of original things, a few traditional tunes, and some guest singers. And we just started brainstorming. And I think we kind of talked about people that I've had a musical connection with or in some way over the years, and, people that might just be a cool addition to the record. So, once we started asking people, I think that kind of also informed the direction of like some of the songs to choose.
Yeah, I had Wes on the podcast a couple of months ago, and he was talking about the process he went through, sort of doing his record with Chris Eldridge producing. And that production side of recording is a fascinating thing, because it sounds like the production side of it almost started before there was a record to produce, that Wes was sort of involved in the whole process.
Definitely. Yeah, I would take him. He helped, I kind of gave him co-writing credit on all the tunes because he was really helpful with those. I came up with kind of all the melodies, but he came up with a lot of the chords for the tunes, which really, changed the way they sounded, and was just a great, we'd just kind of go over my tunes, and he'd be like, oh, I like that one, not that one, add this to this one, that kind of thing. So that was really helpful.
It's amazing what you can do with the harmonization of a tune, isn't it? You can totally change the nature of a melody by what you put behind it.
Absolutely. It completely changes it.
Cool. And so, you've got some great people on this record, and also some great people putting in great performances. Like Sarah Jarosz is just an amazing singer, and she absolutely turned up for this one.
Yeah.
Such a cool version of Last Train.
Oh, it's so nice of her to sing on it. Yeah, it's totally awesome. I'm a huge fan of her singing, and I love it when she sings bluegrass too. So it's cool to have her do something kind of traditional sounding.
I'd never actually heard her sing in person until earlier this year. She came over to the UK on Transatlantic Sessions tour, and I knew she was a great singer. But hearing that from sort of 15 feet away, is a thing.
Yeah, for sure. Oh my gosh. I remember, we were in school together kind of at the same time up in Boston. She was going to New England Conservatory and I was going to Berkeley. So, we'd end up at a lot of parties and jams together and stuff. And yeah, it's just, when you hear somebody sing like that, just so flawlessly up close, it's really incredible.
And it's a real, really interesting mix of voices on the record as well. Cause you've got Tim O'Brien on there, who's, Tim's Tim. He's one of these singers. He's got such an amazing voice, and but also hearing him sing with James Key, who I didn't know before this, and I sort of did a little bit of research and sort of heard you talking about how he's one of your favourite musicians that you met when you moved to Nashville, and he's got a great voice.
Yeah, James is awesome. James is so multi-talented, and he's kind of real pillar of like the Nashville music scene these days. He's got this band East Snatchgrass that plays at Dee's Lounge, which is about a mile from my house here in Madison, and they play every Monday night, and it's just like, you know, some of the best trad bluegrass you'd ever hear, and they're starting to play national gigs. I think they're playing like Romp Festival this year and some other stuff. So yeah, it's great.
Cool. And Chris Eldridge sings on the record as well. And I don't get to hear Chris sing a lot, but he's got an amazing voice. It's so sort of direct, particularly on quiet songs.
Yeah.
Like there's a song an Eddie Vedder song he recorded with Julian Large called "Sleeping by Myself." And when he sings those quiet tunes, there's sort of something unadorned and incredibly moving about it.
Yeah, I love the way he sings. It's so like pure. I want him to do like a bluegrass record. I hope that's going to happen at some point. I'm sure it will.
Yeah. He's got such a cool voice, and particularly that track being such a sort of stripped back track. It's just the three of you, isn't it? It's just fiddle, guitar, and bass.
Yeah, he totally like reimagined that. I think I was thinking that was just going to be another full band kind of bluegrassy cut, because that's kind of how John Hartford did it. But yeah, and then Chris texted me this like stripped down, like finger style version, and I was very confused for a second, and then like loved it. You know, it's just not what I had. And then Wes kept saying that had to be like a trio and stripped down, and I was like, oh no, that's so exposed. But I think it turned out nice. Yeah,
it's beautiful, and it just sort of coming where it does in the record as well. Just before the end, it sort of takes things down again a little bit, and it's like a breath in the middle of stuff, you know, a lovely dynamic to it. And the band that you've got, so you've got various people coming and playing on individual tracks, but you've got a core band for the record. Could you talk us through sort of how they ended up being your core band for this? There's a really interesting mix of people there.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so like Jake Stargell played guitar, and Jeff Picker on bass, and Harry Clark was on mandolin, and Wes played banjo. And I mean, I think all of those guys are people I've known for a long time and just like loved jamming with. First time Jeff Picker plays with Ricky Skaggs, but the first time I met him, he was playing bass. It was probably about 10 years ago, and we were both on a kind of a pickup gig together, and he was playing guitar the first time I met him, and I didn't even know he played bass. But yeah, he's just, I don't know, just a great guy. And same with Jake. We've just been kind of jamming together, and same with Harry. I think I just wanted to pick people that I loved their playing and that I'd feel comfortable with, you know, people that I'm friends with. You know, I could have called people that I didn't know. There's, you know, a million people to call in Nashville, but I wanted to play with people that I was comfortable with and loved their playing. So yeah. Yeah,
it's one of the cool things about listening to a record like this, or like Wes's record or anybody's record, when they've curated the people on it a bit, you know, people are chosen for their sound or their dynamic or whatever it is, and hearing sort of, you know, the sort of ultimate example of that recently is Bela Fleck's recent record of, you know, so many different groups of people he's put together, and just hearing people in different contexts with each other.
Definitely.
It's
yeah.
really
Jake and Harry both kind of have this thing with their playing where they're just monster improvisers. So every solo is great, and every solo is different, and like even sometimes just a totally different approach, which is just like so interesting and like inspiring to play with. They're just, I don't know, they're really kind of just natural feel players. So I think they both brought something really special to the project.
And I guess if they're all people that you're used to jamming with sort of around Nashville, then that's a very different sort of feel to people you're used to playing sessions with. Or, you know, if you're used to being able to play and explore stuff together, then it must give you maybe a sort of shared, musical experiences are always really cool when you've got a certain shared communication that doesn't need anything saying. Somebody just goes somewhere and everybody else follows. And, you know, that must help to have jammed quite a bit before that.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, sometimes like some of my favorite musical moments I've had have just been in jams, you know, and they're never captured, and you never really know if it was as cool as you thought it was or what. But then, you know, you kind of bring people together that you have jammed with a lot, and then you put them in the studio and you capture it. It's a pretty cool thing.
Yeah. And there's something about, any sort of recording is a snapshot. It's like it's a record of what those songs sounded like on that day. And particularly if you've got people who will improvise and go off in any direction, they could have sounded totally different the next day. Or if you'd had a break and come back 2 weeks later, and you may have ended up with a different record, you know, completely.
Totally. Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah. There's a track on the record called "The Minstrel Boy" that Tim O'Brien sings, and I read some of the notes that you put up about it. It says it's a new melody that Tim wrote to a poem from the 1800s. Did he write it for this record?
I don't think so. No, I think he had it kind of in a drafts folder I think he had just a folder of material, and he was, you know, I asked him if he had anything in mind that he'd want to. I think I threw a couple ideas at him, but I wasn't. It's pretty hard to pick a tune for Tim O'Brien to sing on your album. It's a lot of pressure. So I was definitely like left the door open if he had something in mind. And I was, super. I don't know. I thought it was really cool that he would, you know, be willing to use something like that on my record instead of saving it for, you know, something he was going to do. But yeah, it was really nice of him, and it turned out so cool. That's like one of my favorite tracks.
Yeah, I love it. And maybe that's the thing with Tim O'Brien. He's so prolific and has covered so much ground in his time that maybe you're just not precious about saving the best stuff when you've got so much stuff. I remember I saw him in London years ago and went up and requested a particular song. And he went, "Oh, I don't remember that one. That was years ago." You know,
right? Yeah.
For me, that's one of my favorite Tim O'Brien songs. Yeah.
Right. That's funny. Yeah.
Yeah. And listened to an interview with you chatting a while ago, and you were talking about the process of making a record almost as a learning experience and as a sort of way of improving, because you were sort of saying, you know, earlier on the idea of, you know, why does the world need to hear this? And generally with any art, it comes from the artist needing to hear it, doesn't it, and needing to do it, and then hopefully the world likes it too. But yeah, I found it really interesting, the idea that you almost make a record to learn something about your playing and learn about yourself.
Yeah, definitely. It's always a huge eye opener every time I make an album. You know, I made a couple full length ones with Mile 12, and I've been a part of a few, you know, other projects. And then, making my own was definitely next level in terms of learning. You know, you learn things anywhere from like specific notes that you tend to play out of tune to like, you know, what it's going to sound like when certain people play something together for the first time, and it's different than what you thought it was going to be, or anything. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I want to make another one.
Was it different, sort of being your own record, in terms of, obviously you've got Wes there producing it and somebody else is listening during the takes for stuff. Are you able to just play at those moments, or you still sort of got a slight production head on yourself and you'll listen to everybody else, or can you just lose yourself and just get on with the song in that moment?
I think I was pretty just kind of going for it. You know, I think it would have been too much to be trying to listen to everything with a kind of a critical ear. And I feel like the more critical I get in the studio, the worse stuff turns out, in terms of, you know, you get that other side of your brain that's not the creative side a little too active. And then it's hard to be spontaneous and stuff. So I think as much as possible, I was trying to just focus on playing. And I knew I trusted everyone in there, musicians and the producer and Ben, the engineer, and I had a friend taking notes, and, you know, I felt like it was in good hands. So I just kind of went for it. But and then my friend Carolyn, who's a great fiddler, was taking notes, and she would kind of help us narrow down the takes. She'd be like, okay, well, like these three were good takes. So like, then go back and listen to those. And then you don't have to choose from all 10 takes or whatever, however many you did.
And did it feel different from making a Mile 12 record? I don't know how much did you write much material for Mile 12? Hardly
any. If any, did I? I don't think I wrote anything. I mean, maybe I co-wrote on one song, but yeah, almost nothing. So I felt like with Mile 12, it was very, you know, everyone's bringing their piece of it, and I'm in charge of the fiddling, and, Evan's in charge of the singing, and etc. So it's super 5 people deciding on everything, which is kind of really comforting in a way. It's really nice to have, 4 other people to help make a decision on everything. It's a little different, but thankful, I guess that's why you get a producer when you make a solo project oftentimes. So you have at least one other person to bounce things off of. But,
yeah, totally. It's often hard to know what your best stuff is yourself, in any form of creation. You're so bound up in it. It's always interesting to hear other people's opinions, because often the ones they pick out as the best takes aren't the ones that felt like the best takes, or yeah,
it's like everyone has their own certain things that they're listening for, and hopefully like a good producer is more listening to the whole ensemble rather than I'm sure I can get really wrapped up in just listening for the fiddle, and not hear everything else quite as clearly.
Yeah, totally. And you're saying just then that you obviously got a taste for this and you'd like to make another record.
Yeah, definitely. I've been thinking about that a lot this year. I'm starting to gather some material for it. So,
and is it? I guess it's a difficult record to go out and tour with, just in terms of schedules and.
Yeah, that was the one thing about that record that I kind of realized. I guess I knew going into it that it wouldn't be the kind of record you could, even doing like one show on that record would not be the easiest thing. I mean, I put it out during COVID, so there was that, but like, even so, having that many different, like very well-known guest vocalists who would be very busy and trying to like get all those people together on the same day for an album release show, it would just like be a nightmare scheduling. So I think the next record that I make, I think I want it to be more centered around music that I could perform with different ensembles and different bands, whoever was available. So so I'm planning on singing on the next record, and just kind of have it be something I could actually do more shows with down the road.
That'd be cool. So the album you finished all recording pre-COVID then, presumably? Yeah,
it was like right before I probably did the last session, last overdub session was like early March. So
oh wow.
Snuck it in. Yeah, it's crazy.
Cool. And sort of, things have taken off since then. Obviously there was no touring or playing for a while. But suddenly you're kind of everywhere with Molly Tuttle.
Yeah, that's been so fun. I mean, gosh, what a crazy turn of events. I don't think if you'd asked me a year ago, I would have had no idea that this is where I would be and what I would be doing now, but I'm really grateful for it. And it's such a fun band to be a part of. It's total dream band.
It's funny because, obviously been over in the UK, you guys haven't played here, but just seeing the photos and the videos on social media, like it looks like you are having the most fun.
Yeah, I feel like I can't stop smiling on stage because there's just always something or multiple awesome things happening, and just trying to like soak it all in and enjoy it.
It feels like, and this might just be me talking sort of from personal experience, but having a couple of years of no live music and now there being live music, everybody seems just so sort of pumped for it, and so excited about, and just sort of watching a couple of people who were sort of there or thereabouts and on the way before the pandemic just take off since, like Molly being one, just it feels like this record is just, and Billy Strings kind of that's just skyrocketing as well. And it feels like a part of that is just that people are so up for a good live show now.
Yeah, totally. So like hungry for it. And I think the musicians are probably feeling the same way of just like, I kind of had all this pent up energy and like anxiety, and there's so many worries and thoughts of like, oh, am I ever going to be able to tour again or perform again? Like, is kind of really crazy stuff to have to think about after devoting your entire life to something. So then when you're finally able to go back and out and do it, I feel like I'm giving it like everything I've got, because I'm just so happy to be there.
So what were you doing for those 2 years? Obviously it wasn't the whole 2 years, but for the first chunk of it, there can't have been much to do. So how are you keeping busy? Yeah,
the first year. Yeah, I guess it was the whole first year of not really performing. A lot of practicing. I mean, I feel like it definitely got a lot of practicing in that I wouldn't really have had time for otherwise. I dug really hard into like early bluegrass stuff, learning a lot of fiddle breaks from Bill Monroe and Flatt and Scruggs, and then bluegrass album band stuff. I think one of my goals was like to learn every Bobby Hicks solo on all the bluegrass album band records. So I did that. And so stuff like that. A lot of like outdoor activities. I got to know the parks of Nashville very well and did some fishing and taught a lot of lessons too. Like I had a lot of fiddle students. I think it was a kind of a cool way for everyone to connect and have something to do, and gave me purpose and gave them purpose. And that was a cool thing.
Yeah, I'm part of the Artist Works program on Brian Sutton's course and Chris Eldridge's course, actually. And just cool. Seeing how many people sort of joined that over just from being at home. And it's sort of how this podcast came out, really. I was at home with nothing to do and nobody to play with, and just found myself picking up the guitar more and more and having time to play it and wanting an outlet for that there wasn't one. I couldn't go anywhere. So just finding a way of putting something out and connecting with people in some form.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like I spent so much more time on social media and like put way more effort into social media because it was like, it felt like more real all of a sudden. It was like literally the only way I'm seeing my friends and connecting and sharing, so I would start to do a lot of videos and, which is cool. My Instagram account grew. So I guess that's something.
And I thought it was a really interesting time just from somebody on the other side of that, just seeing like people being very, really visible and seeing so much content from people, but it wasn't a record or a live show, or it might be somebody just playing a fiddle tune in their kitchen, or like just the amount of sort of contacts, like you and a different side of people as well. You might see somebody playing a fiddle tune who, on their records don't play fiddle tunes, and seeing a much more casual kind of music making from people was really enjoyable.
Yeah, definitely. I remember one time, it's just like one night pretty early on in the pandemic, just going on, I don't know if it was Facebook or Instagram, but there was just like live stream after live, like everyone was live. And I was just like going through watching my friends all be playing music. It was kind of cool. It just felt like the party was right there, I guess, in a weird way.
Yeah. And it is amazing how much, just how much you can say, and I think some of those things have continued. Like there's so much more streamed live music now as well. And to be able to watch a gig, I live in the UK, a lot of the tours don't happen over here, and there's a lot of stuff goes on at the US festivals that we don't get to see, and to be able to spend a few pounds and watch some of these shows is amazing. And I think that's one of the positive things that's come out of it, is there's now a way of beaming these things around the world. Yeah,
definitely. I think that's definitely true. And even more people are more and more into like virtual lessons as well. I don't think that's stopped since things have opened up. People are still really open to doing that, which is cool.
And you still busy teaching as well?
Yeah, a little bit. I'm trying to balance it with the touring. The touring has been pretty nonstop, but I'm teaching a little bit here and there, but it's not very much these days.
And I guess festival season is kicking in, so that's going to keep you busy over summer.
Yeah, for sure. But, yeah.
And what sort of what's ahead? Obviously, you'd like to know the record. Have you got a sense of what that's going to be yet?
Oh, for the next one?
Yeah.
Well, I like to sing on it. I've been working a lot on my singing last couple years at home. So that's kind of where I'm at with that for the most part. I've just been kind of gathering material. But yeah, I'm not too sure about the specifics yet.
And does the sort of Molly Tuttle and Golden Highway feel like an ongoing thing now? Is that sort of a project, or is that like a band now?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely her, her project. It's looking like it's going to keep going for a while. So that's really exciting, because it feels like we're building something really cool, and, it's going to be awesome to be able to come back to cities we've already played, and, maybe play a bigger venue or play to even more people, and, hit even more festivals. So yeah, it's really fun.
Cool. I think one of the really interesting things, just sort of reading the stuff on your site and reading some of the stuff about the record, one is the sort of sense of, like, on the record, there's a line in the I think it's on your website that talks about slipping into the background in creative ways to support other instruments and guest singers. But also hearing you talk about winning the IBMA Fiddle Player of the Year and talking about made you want to work harder to feel like you'd earned it. And like those two things just really struck a chord in my head, and this sense of like a total lack of, like, not ego is the wrong word, but just such a humility of, okay, that's good. What's next then? And it's something that's really struck me in the bluegrass world, that like, and just how collaborative things are as well, just how much people are prepared to back somebody else up, even if they are a name themselves or have their own career or front their own band. You just don't get it in the rock and pop world, where maybe that's down to money and record companies and contracts, but just the cross-pollination of stuff.
Yeah.
Like, as somebody coming into this scene, it's remarkable.
Totally. And I mean, because I feel like anyone who's really into bluegrass and, like, you know, is into their instrument's role, you know, like, I'm so excited about the way Bobby Hicks plays backup to Tony Rice, you know, and his little fills. Like, I think that's the coolest stuff. So to have the chance to, like, try to do something like that with someone like Molly, or, you know, that's just as exciting to me as, you know, playing like a fiddle tune all by myself, you know, like, I don't know. I think just like, and I think everyone is just like really into their instrument's role in general. So it's a cool thing about bluegrass. Yeah.
And those roles, like, on the face of it, are, you sort of look at people regularly describe a bluegrass band as being like a drum kit, you know, and the bass is the bass drum and the mandolin's a snare drum. And that all makes total sense. But then you hear a range of different bands and they all interpret that slightly differently. So the way Punch Brothers function as a unit is very different to the way that, you know, Mile 12 functions as a unit, or, you know, they're very, people take that and can take it to all sorts of places.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I mean, gosh, people like Punch Brothers, you know, have taken it to the extreme of, you know, transcribing parts from other instruments and, you know, all their cool pop covers that, you know, they're playing different parts that weren't even necessarily meant to be bluegrass instrument parts, for starters, which is really cool.
Yeah. And that you're just saying, sort of talking about to sort of putting fills in around things as well. And that sense of when you hear, I don't know, Stuart Duncan or Jerry Douglas do something like that, you realize what an art form that is in its own right, compared to, you know, just the nuance and the ability to come in with one or two phrases and a little gap and, you know,
yeah,
totally lift
I mean,
things.
I think that's like, yeah, that, I feel like that can be like the hardest thing. I mean, it's all hard, but that, you know, that's definitely an art form. And I feel like that's the thing, like, my fiddle students have the most questions about is playing backup, because it's just less obvious. It's like a little less, it's like harder to explain, right? You can explain how to make a solo and what to play, and you play the melody with some licks, right?
Yeah.
But then, yeah.
Well, and also from the, like, you know, fiddle is, I played guitar and I played mandolin, and I understand how those sort of function. And playing backup as a guitarist in a bluegrass band, like, there's lots of ways you can do it, but it's pretty straightforward. There's a pretty straightforward role you've got, and as a mandolin player as well. But as a fiddle player, if the mandolin's got the chop going on and banjo's sort of rolling around everything, where you fit in while people are singing and other things are going on must be a real thing to learn.
Totally, yeah. And I mean, there's so many different approaches even within that, you know. There's people like Bobby Hicks and Vassar Clements who would play pretty busy and, you know, play really a lot of stuff under the singer. And then there's, you know, there's other folks. Stuart would probably, you know, seems like he's a little bit more spacious with his backup in general, but, you know, but then it depends on the style that he's going for and who he's playing with and all that. It's pretty cool. It feels kind of never ending.
And who were the players that first sort of caught your ear when you started listening to bluegrass? Was there anybody that made you really sit up and listen?
I think the first bluegrass fiddle that I heard and was super excited about was Casey Dreesen. I remember hearing his version of Jerusalem Ridge, and like, yeah, I thought that was the coolest thing. But then after that, definitely hearing like Michael Cleveland and Stewart, Aubrey Haney, Jason Carter, Allison Krauss. I think like that generation of fiddlers was really what got me into it. And after that, then I kind of dug back into into the older stuff. It took me a little longer to listen to that stuff.
Yeah, there's so much now. There's a lifetime's work just listening to the old stuff, and there's so much exciting. It feels like there's a really exciting period for bluegrass and acoustic music in general, but bluegrass feels like it's got a real energized thing going through it right now. There's so much exciting and disparate stuff going on.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, it feels like, you see people like Green Sky Bluegrass and Billy Strings being able to play to crowds that large and play bluegrass and play trad bluegrass. It's awesome, to, I don't know, I guess be able to kind of harness the jam band audience as well as the bluegrass audience and the Americana audience to some degree and the country audience. It somehow seems like all of those people are potential fans of bluegrass. It's just getting the music to them in a way that's going to appeal to them. And I think Molly definitely does that really well as well. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. And I remember Sarah Watkins talking about Nickel Creek going through that thing. I think they really benefited from the Oh Brother surge of interest. If I remember them sort of saying, if you had one bluegrass album that year, it was Oh Brother. If you had two, it was that and Nickel Creek. And they brought a huge audience to bluegrass as well. And it's really interesting to see how people respond to that. And some people really don't like it, and some people love it, and some people don't care either way as long as the music's good. And just see like the variety. I went to see Billy Strings in March. He played over in Europe for the first time, and I saw him on a Friday night in a record store with about 300 people in it. And they finished the set around one mic, and it was like a really, pretty low key, pretty trad. And then I saw him 2 nights later lift the roof off a theatre with full on, and the variety just within that was extraordinary. Like the same band, 2 nights apart, entirely different set, entirely different vibe, and but essentially all coming from the same place.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's so cool. It's like, it's really, really exciting.
And who is there around at the moment that you would recommend people keep an ear out for?
An artist I really love right now is Bella White. She's a great singer-songwriter from Canada, and she's got a bluegrass influence. She's got an old school country influence, and she was opening a lot of shows for Molly this past year in the spring, and it was awesome to hear her every night. But yeah, she's wonderful. Like, she just signed with Rounder, and I think she's going to be a big thing. So definitely check her out.
Cool. Yeah, it's one of the really enjoyable things about how much stuff is available on social media, just in terms of that's almost where I get my news from now. That's my bluegrass newspaper, really. So I sit down and sort of check my feed and see who's doing what and who's talking about who. And but also having these conversations, I talked to, I think, Chris Eldridge first, and he said, "Oh, you should listen to Wes Corbett." And then, talking to Wes, obviously mentioned you, and then there's names come out, and it's like just pulling these threads and following, and all these names that you've heard and people whose music you've heard, but just putting them in this context of, and everything's so interconnected. And it's just so much good music.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And
for sure.
I think one of the interesting things, sort of to take it back to the beginning bit, you sort of started off with the Irish music and Cape Breton fiddling, which I presume is a similar, like more along the trad Irish, old-timey, people play the melody together kind of music.
Yeah.
Do you still play much of that kind of music?
No, I don't play any of it really. I really love it, but I just kind of feel like in order to do it justice, it's kind of like any style of music, I feel like is kind of a full-time thing to keep up the repertoire and the feel and everything. And, I've kind of really fallen in love with bluegrass and feel like I feel like I can express myself more fully playing bluegrass on the fiddle. So I kind of, once I really dove into that, I felt like I had to leave the Irish stuff fully behind for a while, because I was trying to change the way I was bowing and all these little subtle things to make it sound more bluegrassy. And every time I would play Irish music, I felt like it would reinforce kind of the old way of playing. And then it just got to a point where then I couldn't really go back. And then I still remember some tunes and stuff, and I could like fake it. I could play some, but it wouldn't really feel like me, and I wouldn't feel like I had enough repertoire to go sit in a session and play for 2 hours. I remember maybe like 5 years ago or something, I was in Dublin, and I stopped by a session, and I was like kind of cocky, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna go play some Irish music, and I sit down and they're super nice, and then I just can't remember any tunes. I just had this realization, oh man, I'm a bluegrass fiddler now. I'm not an Irish fiddler, which was like a little bit sad, but also exciting. So that's what I wanted. But I don't think I can do it all.
No, it's funny, isn't it? Because like as a non-fiddle player, I can hear the difference. Like obviously there are a lot more tunes in sort of triple time in Irish music anyway, but they sound like relatively connected styles. And yet to hear you talk about the sort of the vast difference and how one is one thing, and even down to technical things like bowing and stuff. It's that as a non-fiddle player, that side of it slightly blows my mind, because the idea of adapting your acoustic guitar style from being a sort of more strummy, folky kind of player to playing bluegrass, there's some definite technical stuff you need to understand. But then stylistically feels like where more of the work is, where it feels like the fiddle, there's a lot of technical difference as well. Yeah,
totally. And it's the kind of subtle things. It feels like an accent, it's like, it's just a whole, it's the way you say everything, the way you articulate every note or word or whatever. And it's like, it would be really hard to switch back and forth between two accents. You kind of would just have to pick one. And if you were going to try to change your accent, it would take a lot of work, and then you would need to really try to be consistent with yourself,
Yeah. Cool. So another album coming up, more gigs with Molly. Is there anything else sort of going on at the moment? I would guess that's keeping you pretty busy.
Yeah, that's basically it. That's kind of full steam ahead with Molly this summer. We've got some really exciting festivals. I'm really stoked to play Telluride for the first time. That'll be really fun. We're doing Delfest in a couple weeks, which will be great. I think we're playing at IBMA in the fall, and so just kind of that's all that's happening right now.
I mean, you said that's all. That sounds like a pretty exciting rest of the year.
Yeah, for sure. I'm really, really excited for it.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for doing this.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
No, thanks for chatting, and thanks for being interested.
Cool, that was a lot of fun. I will put a link to various bits in the show notes. Do go and buy Bronwyn's album Fiddler's Pastime. It's just fantastic. Yeah, I'll put a link to that on Bronwyn's website. I'll also link to Molly's site for Molly Tuttle tour dates. And I'll put a link into Bella White. We can all go and listen to her as well. Great. Back again next week with more. Have a great week. Happy picking.